Hello, today I am doing the audiobook tag. This tag was originally created by BookBuds and it is a series of questions all about audiobooks. The first question is, do you listen to audiobooks? Why or why not? Yeah, I do. I listen to some. Most of the time I read physical books and I do read some ebooks as well, but I do listen to audiobooks sometimes. They're definitely not my main form of reading, but they are ones that I use. As for why, they're just another form of books that are there, and with services like Libby where I can use the library and don't have to pay for them and can use them at home, that's very convenient. Sometimes an audiobook of a book on my TBR is the only option, and I'm okay with using it in that case. But not always if it's the only option. Sometimes, like if it's narrated by the author, especially if it's like a celebrity memoir, which are definitely some of the audiobooks I've listened to, I may be wanting more to listen to a book that was narrated by the author. I think that's extra personal, especially if it's a story about themselves, because then they can say however they truly want to and how they intended to. So I think that that's a pretty cool experience to have. And I've listened to a few of those and enjoyed those. And I especially enjoyed that they were narrated by the author. I think that audiobooks are kind of convenient in a way. At least you don't have to worry about lighting. You don't have to worry too much about getting into a comfortable position compared to with a physical book, because like for me, I just listen to audiobooks on my phone. I have listened on the computer, not as much, but that is an option as well. Basically, they're just available. They are there as an option and I don't mind using them. Second question is, has your use of audiobooks changed over time? If so, how? Well, I didn't start listening to audiobooks until last year. I just didn't listen to audiobooks or read ebooks until last year, and then I learned about Hoopla and Libby. Sadly, my county has discontinued its services with Hoopla, but I was able to use it for a few months. But I can still use Libby, and so at some point I started using those for ebooks and audiobooks. Last year I listened to 5. This year so far I have listened to 7. Well, I'm currently still listening to the 7th. So I have listened to more this year than last year, but last year I didn't start listening to audiobooks until I think it was in August. I've never had any sort of goal like I try to read one audiobook per month or a certain amount each year. Like, it's just whenever I decide to read those. So yeah, my use of audiobooks has changed over time in the sense that I used to not listen to them at all, and now I do. Not every month, but at least a few times a year. Question 3 is, how do you choose which book will be read versus listened to? Well, if an audiobook is the only option, then I think most likely I will take that option. I'm fine with that. If the library has an audiobook and a physical book, I may prefer the physical book. If it's a book that I want to own, then I would probably just buy a physical copy. As I said earlier, I do particularly enjoy books that are narrated by their authors, especially if it's like a memoir. So I think that if that is an option, I may be more likely to do that because I'd love to hear it in the author's voice. But if, like, for example, it's a book that I don't mind not buying and the library has a physical copy but not an audiobook, I'm fine with just the physical copy. I guess it just depends on what my options are, and then I can choose accordingly based on that. But I don't really buy audiobooks. I did have like it wasn't a free trial. I think it was like some sort of deal. It was like pretty cheap and I got like 3 credits out of it. I think I only used 2. So I did that earlier this year, but as for like when it comes to buying books, I usually will just buy physical copies. There are some books I want to get ebooks of, just haven't gotten those yet. So I do plan on that. But when it comes to like buying audiobooks, like would I buy one versus getting a physical copy? Most likely not. There was one instance when I did that this year, but I think that would be pretty rare. I know that sometimes people will both listen to and read a book at the same time, and I did do that with the instance I just mentioned, but I normally won't do that. I definitely think that sounds like a great way to help you focus on the book, so I'm open to doing that more often. I may do that if I'm, for example, borrowing a book from the library, like a physical copy, and then there's also an audiobook available on Libby. I may do that, especially if it's a book that feels like it may be kind of hard to understand and follow along with. The only instance so far in which I have both read a physical book and listened to the audiobook, both of which I owned too, was earlier this year with Fahrenheit 182 by Mark Hoppus, but that was a case where I definitely really wanted to own the book and also listen to the audiobook. So normally I wouldn't mind, but in this case I definitely wanted to have the experience of both. And I understand that sometimes people might get like all 3 formats, like a physical copy, an audiobook, and an ebook. In this case, I didn't feel the need to get an ebook as well, but I definitely understand if somebody does, especially if they just want that accessibility, especially if they travel a lot, for example. Question 4, do you look into narrators before you listen or go in blind? Well, I may see what their name is, but so far I don't have any narrators where it's like I don't want to listen to them, so I avoid them. That hasn't happened. There's yet to be a narrator where I particularly dislike their voice or their performance, so I guess I kind of am going in blind. Like I said, I may see the name, but I've yet to listen to more than one audiobook by the same narrator. But maybe in the future that'll happen where I go listen to an audiobook and I realize I have heard that narrator before. Which so far, because I haven't minded any of the ones I've listened to, I wouldn't be like, oh, they're narrating it, then I don't want to listen to it. So I think it would maybe be exciting. It's like, oh, I'm back to listening to your voice for a few hours again. Question 5. Do you multitask while audiobooking? If so, what else do you do? I typically do not do much else. I have tried doing other things, but that may not work very well for me. I think I experience audiobooks similar to the way that was described by Stuart Griffin. I think when he did this tag, or he mentioned it at some point, that he basically treats it as reading a physical book, like wanting to focus all your attention on that, and I feel the need to do that as well, especially because I really care about getting it all in and making sure I heard and understood everything. So I do rewind them a lot, so audiobooks take me a long time to listen to, but so do physical books. Especially because with physical books, I feel like you're choosing to read them at the pace you want to go, and then with audiobooks, it's kind of just going whether you want them to or not. So you'd have to pause it or rewind it if you missed something, or at least that's how I do it. I know not everyone is that obsessive with it, and I try not to let it become like a big thing, but I do care about getting it all in, so it can take me a while, but I just really try to focus on them. So yeah, I don't really listen to audiobooks while doing chores or anything like that. I just like to treat it as if I'm reading a physical book. But I think it's great that some people are able to listen to audiobooks while doing other things. I think that's a great way to get things done while also still reading. That just doesn't work super well for me at the moment, but that could change. Question 6. If you're reading a series and you listen to the first book, would you ever switch to reading a later book, or do they now all need to be listened to? Well, if I bought a whole collection of audiobooks, then I'd want to use that. But other than that, especially if I'm just borrowing the books and that's my only option, I don't think I'd mind reading some and listening to others. I've yet to listen to any audiobooks that weren't standalone, so I haven't had that experience yet. Yeah, I don't feel like I have a strict rule about only reading a series in a certain format for the whole series, but usually I will just mostly read them in all physical books if that's what I have, because that's just the main format I use anyway. Question 7. What % of the books you're consuming currently are audiobooks? I guess that would be 25%, and the audiobook I am listening to at the moment, like I said earlier, will be my 12th. There is a bonus question, and that is, do you have a favorite narrator or a favorite book that you enjoyed in the audiobook format? Well, as for a favorite narrator, like I said, I haven't listened to any narrators more than once, but I have thought about if I have had a favorite audiobook experience, whether it was the book itself or the performance that I particularly liked. Well, I can give you the statistic of, so far, I have yet to rate any book I read in audiobook format less than 4 stars, so that's good, although I rate it basically based on the book itself and not so much the narrator's performance. So I'm not really rating the audiobook version of it specifically. Last year I listened to Part of My World, Jodie Benson's memoir, and I thought that was a particularly nice experience because it was narrated by her, and she is quite literally the voice actress of a Disney princess, so I think she has a nice voice, so it was nice to hear her read that, and it also was emotional, and I feel like she was good at expressing emotion in it. I don't know if that was my favorite audiobook experience, but it was probably one of the better ones. I haven't had a bad one, but I'd say that was probably one of the best ones so far. And like I mentioned Fahrenheit 182 earlier, I think that was a pretty fun experience just because that was about a topic and person that I particularly like. So that was pretty fun to listen to. So Fahrenheit 182 was definitely the audiobook I enjoyed the most, but that's just kind of personal bias rather than which was the best performance, not that that was a bad one. But I'll give some honorable mentions for audiobooks I've listened to. Earlier this year, I listened to Autism in Heels, narrated by the author Jennifer Cook O'Toole, now just known as Jennifer Cook, so her name may be written differently on different things, but I listened to that and I enjoyed that. Earlier this year, I listened to Britney Spears' memoir, The Woman in Me. That one is not narrated by Britney Spears herself. That one was narrated by Michelle Williams, which I still thought was a good performance. But yeah, that's the only audiobook I've listened to that was not narrated by the author when it was a memoir. But I still thought it was good. So that was a pretty interesting one. I still think about that sometimes. So those are some of the more recent audiobooks I really enjoyed. But there was the audiobook tag. It also says to tag some friends, and like I usually say, just whoever sees this and wants to do it can do it as well. And thank you for watching.